Welcome to my channel. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. In this video, we'll be touching on the life and times of Dennis Edwards. Dennis Edwards was born on February 3rd, 1943 to his mother and father, Reverend Dennis Edwards Sr. He began singing at the age of 2 in his father's church. The family moved to Detroit, Michigan when Edwards was around 10 years old, and Edwards would continue to sing in his father's church, eventually becoming choir director. As a teenager, Edwards joined a gospel vocal group called the Mighty Clouds of Joy and studied music at the Detroit Conservatory of Music. He was not allowed to sing or listen to secular music at home, and his mother did not approve when he began pursuing a career singing R&B music. In 1961, he organized his own soul jazz group, Dennis Edwards and the Fireballs. Also in 1961, Edwards recorded a single for the Detroit-based label International Soulville Records. I Didn't Have To, But I Did was the name of the song. Following time served in the U.S. military in 1966, Edwards auditioned for Detroit's Motown Records, where he was signed but placed on retainer. Later that year, he joined the Contours after their lead singer, Billy Gordon, fell ill. In 1967, the Contours were the opening act for several Temptations concerts, and Temptations members Eddie Kendricks and Otis Williams, who were considering replacing their own lead singer, David Ruffin, who was a personal friend of Edwards, took notice of Edwards and made his acquaintance. It was Ruffin who gave the thumbs up for his friend Edwards to replace him in the group, even telling Edwards about the proposed hiring beforehand. Edwards made his Temptations debut on the 1968 single Cloud 9, a song that would win the group its first Grammy and Motown's first as a label, and put them at the forefront of the burgeoning psychedelic soul movement, with producer Norman Whitfield now producing and writing most of their hits, replacing the Temp's former main songwriter, Smokey Robinson. The group was going into a more topical direction, with a funky, less ballad-driven sound that was heavily influenced by Sly Stone. The Temptations' commercial run continued into the 1970s, as did the personnel changes, personality conflicts, and drama. Mainstays Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams left. Damon Harris and Richard Street joined, and Dennis began to bump heads with long-running members Melvin Franklin and Otis Williams. The group departed Motown in 1977 for Atlantic after complaints with the label over money, but Otis Williams told Edwards prior to the label move that he was out. Williams had been growing frustrated with producer Jeffrey Bowen focusing too much on Edwards as lead vocalist. Bowen had replaced Whitfield, who departed Motown in the mid-70s, to start his own label, and the Temptations' commercial run dried up. To Williams, Bowen and Edwards were to blame. Fame had the expected effect on Dennis, and he had fallen into some of the trappings. Aretha Franklin wrote her 1972 classic Daydreaming about the Temptations singer. The two fell in love and were close to marriage, but things came to a harsh end when Edwards began seeing Ruth Pointer of the Pointer Sisters. Edwards and Pointer would briefly marry, but the two fell deep into cocaine addiction in the late 1970s. The drugs also played a role in Edwards' dismissal from the Temptations. He did, however, rejoin the group when they returned to Motown in 1980. Drugs were a major part of Ruffin's notoriety, and it didn't help when Edwards began performing with ex-Temptations Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks, who had reunited with the Temptations for the Reunion album in 1982. The reunion eventually fell apart as Ruffin's addictions made him unreliable, and soon Edwards began missing shows as well. He would be fired from the Temptations in 1984, following a successful solo run, which saw Edwards release the hit 1984 duet Don't Look Any Further with Saida Garrett. He rejoined the group, only to leave again for a third and final time in 1987. Over the years, notable Temptations passed on suddenly. David Ruffin would die from a cocaine overdose in 1991, following a tour with Edwards and Kendricks. Kendricks from lung cancer in 1993, and Melvin Franklin fell into a diabetic coma and died in 1995. Damon Harris died of prostate cancer in 2013, and Richard Street died a week later of a pulmonary embolism. I never imagined Otis and I would be one of the last ones standing, said Edwards in a 2013 interview with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. We really got caught up in the times. We dibbled and dabbled with alcohol and drugs, but it's important for people to know if you change your lifestyle and wake up, there is hope. I had a mother who prayed for me, and prayer changes everything. In the popular 1998 NBC miniseries The Temptations, Edwards' role in the group is given minimal attention as compared to the classic five. The only noteworthy moment depicted the infamous argument between Edwards and legendary songwriter-producer Norm Whitfield over the opening lines of Papa Was a Rolling Stone. The story goes that Edwards' father had really died on that day, infuriating the singer. In reality, Edwards' father had passed in October. Dennis Edwards was more than the other guy who stepped in to replace a legend. Edwards was one of the best gospel shouters in the history of soul music and one of the defining voices of the Temptations. It was Edwards' voice that carried them through their most sonically ambitious period, and it was Edwards' approach that came to define the Temptations vocally throughout the 70s and into the 80s. Allegedly, at the time of his death, due to a massive stroke, sadly, Dennis Edwards was a quadriplegic. Chicago police were investigating allegations that Dennis Edwards, a Grammy-winning singer with the Motown group The Temptations, was abused shortly before his death. The documents allege that Brenda Edwards had attempted to suffocate the 74-year-old by holding his head face down on a bed. The investigator also accused Brenda Edwards of taking her husband's hearing aids from him, according to a petition for an order of protection. The documents say Edwards was bedbound and immobile. Allegedly also, an anonymous tipster called a hotline claiming Brenda was abusing her husband, and the singer told a caseworker that his wife was trying to harm him. Dennis Edwards was removed from the home because of medical issues, according to documents. And Brenda Edwards disputed the allegations. Meanwhile, Brenda's friends were allegedly defending her against Dennis's daughters on a message board. Dennis Edwards fell ill in 2017, reportedly from meningitis, and was in and out of the hospital. Although one of his daughters, Issa Pointer Stewart by Ruth Pointer, who was appointed the singer's power of attorney, said she never heard the doctors say he had meningitis. Late last year, Brenda Edwards moved him from the St. Louis area to a luxury high-rise apartment building on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, family said. This was 2016. While there, Edwards underwent a stint in rehab at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab to remove a ventilator he had been using for much of the year. After Edwards was released from rehab and sent home, an investigation was launched by Adult Protective Services after he initiated a complaint, Pointer Stewart said. The protection order also alleges a history of abuse by the respondent, Brenda Edwards, and required that his cell phone, hearing aids, and iPad be given back. Pointer Stewart, who was in Miami on tour with the Pointer Sisters, her mother, Ruth Pointer, married Edwards in 1977, said she felt and her siblings had been isolated from her father. She felt she and her sisters had been isolated from her father. Dennis had 5 daughters and 1 son. Last year, Leon Fuller of Detroit said, that's also 2016, he kept calling to speak to his first cousin, but Brenda Edwards wouldn't let me know where he was. Why would she move him to Chicago? Edwards was an imposing figure at 6 feet 4 inches tall, a big personality with a strong, commanding voice to match. Friends and family are shocked that Edwards was completely helpless at the end. Fuller, 84, received a call from a nurse in January to let him know Edwards was in the hospital. I went over to see him. He smiled at me, Fuller recalled. I hate the way he went out. Detroit singer Betty Lavette said she saw Edwards, and although he told her he was ill, he looked fine. She said, I just can't imagine him ending up in this situation. Daughter Pointer Stewart, 40, says she has fond memories of her father. He was extremely funny. He gave me this incredible voice and this larger-than-life presence. Both me and my son sort of have that. I hope we can give him what he deserves. Brenda Edwards was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, but Dennis Edwards passed away in 2017. Rest in peace to Dennis Edwards. Thanks for watching my video. Please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Thanks.